Witam serdecznie.
Welcome back. Welcome to all the participants and the panelists. I am very much honored to be able to moderate this panel, this debate, dealing one of the most important aspects connected with education and building awareness. My name is Ania Szostakiewicz. I represent the Institute of Flat Machines of the Polish Institute of Sciences, Kazan R&D Center, Kazan Foundation. And I'd like to present our speakers who have co-created the Polish Hydrogen Agreement. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their input in preparing this document on education and raising awareness. I'd like to introduce our guests. And from my left, Joanna Kubik, Director of the Oil and Gas School Complex of Ignacy Łukasiewicz, Mr. Sławomir Wołski, Associate Dean for Faculty Development, Mathematics Applied Physics, Rzeszów Polytechnic. Good afternoon. Dr. Ziemowit Socha, Institute of the Platform of the Future platform. And Grzegorz Kulczykowski, Training Coordinator, Safety Academy, Eco Consult Coordinator. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, the Polish Hydrogen Agreement, which we will soon have the pleasure of signing, I do hope, is a proof and an example of how one can integrate various units, so both coming from science, business, etc. All those which co-created a document which defines goals for reaching climate neutrality by Poland. And I wanted to ask you about issues connected with awareness, public awareness, and this question dealing with awareness. Maybe first Dr. Joanna, who represents this, as it is said, this lowest level when it comes to qualification, because she's the director, the principal of the Oil and Gas School in Krośno. Now, answering your question, I wanted to say one thing. Awareness is not that great, but there is potential there. There is will. There's a lot of stereotypes, a lot of hearsay connected with hydrogen. We don't have hydrogen issues explained in the programs of secondary schools. These programs have to be created. It's quite a challenge. So we do not have proper teaching programs. We don't have appropriate labs in schools to deal with these issues. However, we do have awareness that it's a very important subject, and talking with those present here and exchanging opinions, we come to a conclusion that a lot can be done. Schools, with the support of academia, of business, should start implementing these topics as part of their educational programs, especially trade schools, technical schools, good chemical schools, because with the very intense development of this branch of science, a lot of qualified employees will be needed. It's a process that needs to be planned, which requires time. I can only add that Madam Director, as one of the first, introduced an innovative program in her school, and she was the initiator of Hydrogen Days in Krośno. She came from the other end of Poland, literally, to tell us about the importance of the aspect of education, building awareness. So thank you very much. And the same question to Dr. Sławomir Wołski. Well, awareness. It all depends which group we are approaching. If we're looking at self-government representatives, we can say that it's quite good. However, in fact, it's not that great. So if in Podkarpacie region we meet with local government representatives, it's not always that great. It's a great challenge. It's a question of who, when, and how should do it. Of course, it's easy to say when. When? Right now. Today, we've taken on such challenges. We've organized the first picnic in the Podkarpacie region, the Hydrogen Days in Naptówka, which brought together a lot of local government representatives who have learned that this issue is very important. So building this awareness must be based on media, on raising interest in the media. It's the journalists who are going to reach the wide groups of society with the message. Since I am representing here higher education institutions, I'm responsible for training technical professionals. But if those future professionals do not know that they have a perspective of growth, of development, of professional career, they're not going to come to the studies. They're not going to come to educate themselves in these programs. We can make up the best programs, but there won't be no candidates here because more attractive programs will be connected with law, medicine, with other issues. Also about who should build this awareness. Here we mean both representatives of the media, they need to be educated, but also representatives of science in various ways. For example, through participation in various groups, panels where we participated in creating the regional innovation strategy, where hydrogen was mentioned explicitly. So it's clearly stated that hydrogen technologies are extremely important. From the perspective of 2027, at least in our region, in Podkarpacie, this is about 160 billion zloty. And hydrogen was clearly mentioned there, and so here awareness is extremely important. And third aspect is, of course, entrepreneurs. If they are not aware of the fact that this market is coming, that this technology is going to get in, that there will be a change in the energy carriers, they will be late in relation to their competition, to those entrepreneurs who are going to be in Germany or in other regions of Europe or the world. Thank you. Same question to you, Dr. Zimowicz. I'm thinking, what could I add to what has already been said? I think perhaps one of the key points that should be emphasized is that if we compare awareness of economic potential of the hydrogen technology on the 4th and 5th October 2021, or what was it like a year ago or 2 years ago, we might say that we didn't have such events like this in the past, that there was less discussion about it. So this discussion, debate is very important about how we want to use these hydrogen technologies so that the prosperity of our nation can be increased. Of course, we all want to have access to cheap, ecologically friendly energy as consumers. And if we're going to keep it in mind, as Sławomir has mentioned, so that entrepreneurs, especially SMEs, get interested in it, because of course the big players, government companies are interested in it. We have a Congress, like 2050, where the hydrogen theme is very much discussed among the biggest players in the technological market in Poland, but we can go a lower down. We can use this technological hydrogen as this train that is just gaining speed, so we can still jump aboard and base our strategy on it, and perhaps also think about getting rid of certain barriers, organizational, fiscal, legal, for those who take on this challenge, so that development of hydrogen technology is associated with our location here. Grzegorz, you deal with safety issues, a very important aspect. So in the context of building awareness, how do you deal with those myths about hydrogen being explosive, dangerous? This is... We know that in a way it's true, but we all know that it's going to be the fuel of the future as well. So how do you approach the subject? Perhaps I would start with presenting the mental profile of our typical trainings participant, because I deal with training and we We train specialists, 90% engineers, and they have various motivation to come to training. Training also dealing with hydrogen that we've been conducting for about a year and a half with quite a bit of interest, by the way. So this mental profile basically starts with this engineer facing a certain problem. For example, he or she finds out that his plant is going to enter into hydrogen technology and something must be learned about. Then, if there is a problem, then certain knowledge has to be gained to deal with this problem. So they enter training. And with this knowledge in mind, a certain effort is taken to solve the problem. So it's also a bit of an answer to what professor has mentioned, because there was a interest about interest in the studies. Well, the approach of engineers is that if there is no problem, then we don't really need that knowledge. So we are not really thinking whether in some future horizon it's going to be essential, because that's where it's going. The attitude, at least that's my experience, is here and now. So if we need to have a concrete problem, okay, we have a problem. And if the problem disappears, I no longer need that knowledge. So that's as far as our trainees. Now, what is their level of awareness, their knowledge? Well, I was thinking of these key words such as insufficient, scattered, hidden, not available, lack of it. But when one thinks about it more carefully, I have to divide it into several parts, because the problem is a bit wider and there are certain distinctions I should introduce. First of all, hydrogen technologies means production, distribution, storage, use, transport. And in each of these sectors, nobody knows everything. So the question is, where do we lack most knowledge? I think the biggest interest on part of engineers goes into distribution, transport. We know there are going to be fuel, there will be hydrogen fuel stations, installations. There will be several hundred of, hopefully. There are 2, 3 that are planned right now, but there's going to be many of them, because in Germany we have, over 100, I think, if not more. So there's going to be quite a few designs like that. The second distinction is specialization. That is, we have technologists, we have electricians, we have automation specialists, we have safety engineers. We usually deal with those, work in safety specialists. And in each and every one of these areas, we have certain lack of knowledge, certain gaps, and certain specific knowledge that they do have in these sectors. And the third distinction point, in order to make it even more complicated, is in the way of supplementing the knowledge. So here I would divide into 3 areas as well. And this is my own division. The first is the knowledge that such a specialist, such an engineer can get by himself or herself, for example, by purchasing literature, studying standards, getting a bit deeper into things on the internet, searching for certain solutions, and so on. Now, the second area is the knowledge which I would call it lack of knowledge that one can live with. So all in all that is needed to know is who is the specialist that knows about it. So it's enough to recognize the fact that I don't know anything about this area, but I know there is a specialist who can deal with it, or a company who has the know-how and can solve the problem. And the third area, probably the hardest, is the knowledge that is needed, that is essential, and which he doesn't know how to get. So I'll give you an example of such absence, which is very much needed. For example, electrolyzers. We'll have electrolyzers. Okay, now, how do they work? We know. We've been told in elementary schools in the old system of the electrolyzers, but the construction details we're not really interested in, says our exemplary specialists. What is he or she interested in? Well, they're interested what element of electrolyzer installation after a year of operation will be the most critical, where the biggest problem might appear, in other words. So this is a very important question from the point of view of operation, because let's say we know that there was a fire on some hydrogen fueling station in Norway, and the cause, as it turns out, was a valve that was not installed properly, not according to procedure. So it's knowledge that is crucial to safety engineers. What elements are most prone to dysfunction, who faults? Now, who has such knowledge? Well, only those people who've worked with such installations, with electrolyzers. This is a continuation, where these people are. Perhaps they're abroad, probably. So maybe I'll stop here. So I wanted to keep on going to this awareness topic because it's very important. Clusters play a very important role here. We're at the conference of Pomorskie cluster. So these issues connected with building awareness on engineering and general global levels are very important, because it's no secret that I had a pleasure that I was driving a taxi driver. He heard hydrogen. He started talking about hydrogen bomb. Hydrogen is generally associated with something very dangerous. People think hydrogen, they think danger, right? So hydrogen has to be demystified. We need to say that it's most elementary element, that it's part of stars, that it's part of that when it's burned, it creates water. So we have to show that these technologies that are going to be introduced will make the scale and the usability of these technologies become more and more popular. Now, going to Grzegorz once again, have you met questions, queries about regarding not just engineering knowledge, such electrolyzer, etc., but there is a need to educate more generally on all of these levels, the general ones as well. Let me answer this way. We mostly educate, train engineers, so in our training, we talk a lot about breakdowns in order to avoid such breakdowns, such faults in the future. Perhaps I'll mention two basic differences in approach to safety. One on part of a novice alike, and the other represented by an expert on safety. Now, for an average layman, skeptic alike, safety means lack of threats, lots of danger. But for an engineer, the situation when there is no threat, there is no such situation. There is always a threat, because threats are everywhere. Even in paradise, the snake does appear, right? So the definition of safety for engineer, it is safety is a condition in which all the threats are under complete control. And gasoline we deal with on an everyday basis at petrol stations. It's a highly explosive substance, very flammable substance. Gasoline fumes are very flammable. We have gas at home, methane, which is an explosive gas. Everybody uses it daily. Nobody's afraid of it. Same in petrol station. I don't think we're all that afraid when we enter a gas station. So hydrogen has specific qualities which are different than methane and gasoline, than various other potentially harmful substances, but there's an answer to everything. So this has to be explained in this way. So at bottom, I'd like to underline these challenges that Grzegorz has mentioned. So in the context of debate, of discussion about building hydrogen awareness, we need to start with the safety. So we need to basically take down these myths of the dangerous hydrogen. This is the great role of such companies you represent, and the role of the cluster. This should be the role, building awareness. Asha, I'd like to say that here we have a great role for schools here. From the lower educational level, from the lowest educational level, which can break these stereotypes in thinking and present hydrogen first and foremost as this clean fuel. So I think that educating people from grade one will definitely make this entire process easier, the process of reaching for knowledge, searching for knowledge, gaining knowledge, because we've mentioned as Grzegorz showed us very interesting in a topological way. It's a huge area of knowledge. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The regular school is not able to educate fully in each of these aspects. In our school, we've decided to implement an innovative program, but it's just one of the aspects dealing with storage, hydrogen storage. Now, in order to have full knowledge, of course, we need various phases of education and cooperation with clusters, for example.
So we've smoothly shifted from awareness raising to the issues concerning education. I would like to approach it now from a different angle and ask a question about education. What is the level of knowledge of our staff? How would we like to get about this transformation? How about the safety? First and foremost, are our schools ready? Is the educational system ready to incorporate hydrogen technologies to the curriculum? Well, we have specific participants of our courses. Let's call them students. So we specialize in safety. So our awareness raising is somewhat different than the one we deal with at school. When I listen to Anna, this role of actually calming people down, teaching them that hydrogen can be controlled, that there is a response and a way to prevent any kind of threat. Well, this is what is the role of education. What we deal with, what challenges we have to face, is mostly lack of staff, of lecturers. Why? Because hydrogen technologies on such a scale will come as something new. This is something relatively recent. Thinking about how many years we've been introducing them for. There are a lot of facilities in Poland, but not that many, in which hydrogen is being generated. I'm talking about industrial hydrogen, where hydrogen is stored at a big pressure. So it's about awareness once again. It is explosive as a gas, of course, and we work in the safety sector, where for many years we've been dealing with counteracting and preventing explosions, so that petrol or gas or methane, so that all these substances that we get in touch every day do not explode. I have come across, asked one of our engineers, not from my company, but a very, very good trainer, to actually offer a training. I'm not going to list particular topics, but about threats from hydrogen. And of course, that was supposed to be done in the context of the challenges that the Polish economy is facing. So compressed hydrogen trailers, hydrogen distribution station, hydrogen vehicles, buses, and so on. And he told me, listen, I would love to carry out such a training, but the only hydrogen that I have dealt with is the one from the battery room, which is, somewhere there in the air, but it's not this kind of hydrogen. But the one under big pressure, the engineers dealing with it in those big companies, they are in great demand, and they're really involved in very serious projects. And again, I've had a chance to talk to one of them, and I asked him to carry out such a training. He smiled, because, well, he's one of those who like to train others. He likes to share his knowledge with others. He's not the kind of person who would hold it for himself. But he said to me, well, I apologize to you, but I'm really involved into one of the projects in southern Poland, the Asło, they're developing it there at Trzebinia, and I'm going to just be there, in the facility. So when am I supposed to give the training? So this is where the problem is, right? So, well, maybe later on I will give you a positive example, but this is what it is like from my point of view. From the point of view of the Institute. Well, I would like to start with the fact that our institute, so Educational Research Institute, is reporting to the Ministry of Science and Education, and it treats education very broadly. So we do not talk about what is going on at schools and universities, but we are talking about lifelong learning, so also about courses and trainings. But what is more important is also about self-education. So about learning on your own, about this informal kind of learning. Now, in order to develop this kind of education, we've introduced the integrated qualification system. We're talking here about market qualifications in the first place, so those qualifications that the business sector cares for, so mostly entrepreneur. So describing such qualifications, introducing them to the system should also be one of the goals of awareness raising and communicating, educating with the market. This is one of the goals that was adopted when we started working on the integrated qualification system. That is why we would like to encourage those who are interested in prospecting for staff members to get in touch with it so that we have a sufficient number of engineers sharing knowledge wherever needed. And well, we can already benefit from what is there in the system. The schools might not be, in fact, structurally ready for that. The same might be the case with universities, but there are legal solutions in the system that can be used already. You can introduce those full qualifications on the fifth level of the Polish qualification framework. So a technology specialist textbook. We're talking about engineering studies, but well, I'm sure that your University of Technology is also sparing thoughts to the such issues. So it's important that it's not the lowest level of education, because what you represent is a technical middle school, right, secondary school. But this is something that can already be introduced in primary schools, chemistry classes. We participated in certain works as Educational Research Institute as far as hydrogen agreements are concerned. Now, I'm going to refer to the question of whether our staff members are ready and whether the educational system is ready to it all. Well, I'm not sure here, because as far as the education system goes, at least when we talk about tertiary education, this is something that is dispersed. There is no purely hydrogen-related faculty, and maybe there shouldn't be, owing to the specialization of storing, specialization concerning the system, the generation, and so on. So we can say that the educational system and tertiary education could do something like that. Well, when we talk about the time horizon, preparing the curriculum, it being adopted and launched by all sorts of university senates or the commissions, would take a year to 2 years, then 3.5 years to release first engineers. It is easier when we have faculties like here in the Rzeszów University of Technology. We've got chemical and process engineering. So you could explain and introduce some hydrogen-related issues. So again, in 3.5 years, you would have specialists. But when we talk about that's tertiary education, higher education. But even if it's the best kind of curriculum, it will be nothing if it is not linked to the industry. And here we are looking in the direction of sectoral qualification framework, which would be useful for universities, but also would be useful to Grzegorz when we speak about trainings, where we could really be spoon-feeding in terms of what competences, what scope of knowledge a specialist in a given field should have, and whether these standards have been developed in cooperation with industry representatives of the entities that actually do need these experts. Now, when we talk about the state of education, here we need to talk about two groups of issues here, actually. One group of entrepreneurs are concerns. And I think that, as Grzegorz said, there are experts there who have been working for a longer time now with hydrogen technologies. They generate it, they store it, they compress it. They make sure that it is safe. They treat it as gas. Of course, it's specific in its nature because you need to take corrosion into account, adjust the materials, and so on. Now, These concerns could potentially be used in co-creating, defining these, identifying the competences for future staff. So we can imagine some kind of common projects, like, for example, ordered education, implementation PhDs, or at the slowest level, when we talk about middle level education, so secondary schools, we could talk about it, because when we focus on the primary level, it's more about awareness training. But when you talk about vocational schools, we talk about this secondary school level, and then, of course, tertiary level. So that is technological universities. So here we could build on the experiences of concerns for staff training and staff educating. But there is also the other group, the group of newly created jobs. When we talk about hydrogen that is supposed to get to the households, if these are some cogeneration installations or dispersed, distributed ones, then we will need those who install it, those who service it and design it, and won't be enough for them to be taught in just a narrow section. They will have to be aware of the full system right from scratch if it's a service installation. Like, similarly, when we talk electromobility, again, at this point, we need certain new jobs, and there is still a lot of questions about what kind of competence these people are going to need. So I guess that this is something to focus on too. And well, another question is, who is supposed to train these people? There is the education system, but there is also the informal learning. Apart from it, you've got entrepreneurs, you've got those institutions that surround business, and it's important for those who would like to either retrain themselves and change jobs, or would like to complement their knowledge. And it might be postgraduate courses or industry-related courses that lead to somebody becoming a certified expert. So a lot of work to be done. That's precisely what we are talking about when we talk about market qualification. This is the certification system that is adjusted to the needs of entrepreneurs. And I will chip in too, telling about one other thing. Very often we are not aware of the fact that we are talking about the jobs that don't even exist, right? That are not even on the professional qualification list. We need to bear this in mind, working in education, that the technological advancement, development is really fast. So how to do it, for example, in vocational schools, technical schools? Well, it has to be dual training. The dual training is a model that has been elaborated by various countries of Europe, and it involves schools feeding theory into students, whilst all the practical activities are performed at the employers. It is not possible to create such laboratory conditions, for example. That is why we would kindly ask entrepreneurs to cooperate, so work within clusters that entices cooperation of business with schools of all levels. And this is what gives the fullest possible results. And the teachers are willing, but they need to be supported. Now in the school, secondary school curricula, there are like 2 classes in the entire chemistry program that teach about hydrogen in the last grades of primary schools or secondary schools. So we do need the support, really. That's what it is, sadly, today. Yes, the role of clusters as integrators of market and education should be emphasized here. Somebody should take the challenge to create this platform for discussion between schools, universities, and probably the business environment, institutions, associations, but maybe also greater enterprises, those bigger ones, because the small ones might not have the time to meet. But also there might be some training companies operating in this scope. And thus, smoothly. We are moving on to the last question of the debate concerning the role of self-governments in creating and popularizing hydrogen technologies. How do you see the role of the newly established hydrogen valleys, the business environment, institutions? Maybe you'll start with Grzegorz. Well, I will share an example, perhaps, what that will illustrate what it works like. So I guess there are two positive, interesting implementations. It's about two training programs in which we benefited from the fact that we belonged to the hydrogen cluster. And one of those trainings is run by Mr. Marek Foltynowicz, present in the conference. A need arose among specialists to get introduced into hydrogen technologies and to get this cross-cut knowledge, but this basic knowledge that is indispensable. And the first idea of where to find the expert was, well, let's ask in the cluster. It is really important to find such a place and for such a place to exist where those experts and this expertise in the context are grouped together. Another very positive example of cooperating with an educational institution is another training we offer that is highly popular and highly assessed. That is the safety of hydrogen installation. That the genesis of it was that our specialists, our engineers from the company, decided the needs, educational needs that should be met. That is, what kind of knowledge should be delivered. They created a framework, a curriculum, and then, well, they actually asked themselves the question, what I would like to know. So they found reliable sources of knowledge. They browsed through the standards. And then, well, we wanted to implement it, and we started searching for the trainers. So the first thought that came to our mind was to go to some research institutions. There is an association, not a cluster, but an association of scientists who deal with hydrogen. I cannot recall the name now. And out of the list offered by this association, we found Dr. Seron from the Poznań University of Technology, who decided to conduct such a training. And he said that it actually fits in nicely into his scientific research. He was going to use it working with his students. That also meant some additional points that resulted from Minister Govin's reform of higher education. And this training has been offered 3 times already. 2 have been ordered. It's possible to order them. We are going to train as a pack, among others. So that's a positive example of how that can be done. What can self-governments do? Well, self-governments are, of course, those that are responsible for technical schools. Probably this is something that teachers are dissatisfied about because they do not probably earn enough to feel motivated to learn about the latest technologies. So I guess that local governments should be, more positive in approaching the teachers. Yes, it's absolutely true. Thank you very much for mentioning it. Well, as regards the role of self-governments at this point, this role is crucial. Well, again, we have an example from the Podkarpacie region where the Podkarpacie Hydrogen Valley is being established. And actually, it grouped together, clustered people who should be there. So both local authorities, and here we are talking about the Marshal's Office. We are talking about about central government representatives, so the voivod. We are talking about city mayors, but we are also talking about universities from the Podkarpacie region who also entered this letter of intent as stakeholders in the Podkarpacie Hydrogen Valley, but also enterprises, Autosan, for example. And 2 companies on top of that. One is ML System, PV producer, and the other one is Febrain, linked to fiber optics. Why have I mentioned those companies? Because what is important for the development of those cutting-edge technologies is particular individuals who are visionaries. If you take a look at the history of inventions, of scientific developments, very often they were based not on this mass of people, but individuals. Those individuals obviously needed to have conditions in order to be able to act. Well, there's this problem whether it's an idea of the tool, but anyhow, you need to have both together at the same time for an invention to be possible or a discovery to be impossible. Like Elon Musk, well, if you want to look, for example, the man exploring the space. So in the Podkarpacie region, we've got two visionaries of this kind, and we invited them to this hydrogen valley. They created their companies from scratch. They keep on developing and they will turn into this driving force for cutting-edge technologies and not necessarily only focusing on their business activity, which is worth paying attention to. Fantasy is needed as well. And plus, plus the institutions of business environment, various agencies like, for example, Industry Development Agency or some other agencies. So clustering is important for the new technologies to develop. I will also add something from my field here. The role of local self-governments is crucial. I think that even organizing such a conference like the one we are participating in is so important. Scientific picnics and other events, or supporting schools in prospecting for teachers. We do have training options for teachers. They need to train themselves, be interested, but they also need to know what they will be working for. So they need to have some decent remuneration. We at schools are looking for experts in the industry, but we directors of schools will need to offer something in return. We would like to feel that we are supported by the local government, and then creativity of teachers and their engagement can really bring a lot of fruit. And of course, we're constantly thinking about this perspective that we are talking about now. We keep on talking about RES at school. We keep on touching upon topics concerning ecology, clean air. And this is something that has to be real. It cannot be theory only. These cannot be empty words. It has to be something that has to happen, and we can achieve it only working together. And I guess this is what we could use as a summary. Well, self-government institutions. I can't remember this category, but it's like something like Copernicus Center of Science in Gdynia. I also have such a center whose name I cannot recall, but these are institutions that support education practically. They have more financing for infrastructure. We are in one of such centers, right? At this point, this is a technological park, but I'm talking about this purely experimental institution with its offer directed at young people. So it's not about museum, but it's interactive education center, which can be a challenge that could be interestingly linked and boost the educational offer. That's what I was thinking about. New professions, new jobs, chance for the future. Next year we've got Łukasiewicz here, and I think that here both University of Technology and the Krosno-based school will certainly offer celebrations, combining it smoothly with hydrogen. I would like to offer you a wrap-up round about your feelings on raising awareness and education. If you could give us just your final remark. If you mentioned Łukasiewicz, then I guess, Sławek, here we need to invite you, and we want to invite you to the Podkarpacie region. You will see that the image of the world has changed civilization-wise. We still have some working plans, excavating natural gas and oil. We cannot completely resign from it, but we can somehow combine it with hydrogen. There is a prototype of an oven that uses a mixture of gases with hydrogen that has already been patented. But Łukasiewicz, because I would like to refer to him, was a bold man. And with his courage, he turned his visionary ideas into reality, leading to more outstanding solutions discoveries. And I think that our conferences, our meetings, your wonderful cluster, and the hydrogen agreement, I guess, are also the future for the new generations. And I certainly hope that the Łukasiewicz's year will be celebrated in this context. Well, nothing more to add, really, after we've heard from Madame Director here. So I subscribe to it, also inviting you. Well, the Podkarpacie region is located in such a way that there is no sea, there are no stable winds. You can generate some areas with photovoltaics, but we are located close to Ukraine, and perhaps hydrogen generation could be supported with nuclear energy at the close to our border with Ukraine. You have on the Ukrainian side, you've got one of the biggest storage facilities. So again, we can use the potentials of human resources that we keep on exporting from our region to other academic milieus. Of course, well, sadly, this is going on, but we need to work on developing this education, and probably hydrogen technology constitutes a chance to change the image of the Podkarpacie region. Ignacy Łukasiewicz is an interesting example of a scientist from whom we can learn something that not maybe he failed to do, but what did not happen to him. So we had a fantastic scientific innovation that was not used on an economic scale to the benefit of our country. So wrapping up, we can really watch our business and learn from our mistakes. Yeah. I would also like to sum up by saying that for me, well, a well-known solution is not that I am trying to reinvent the wheel, is close cooperation of scientific institutions with business. I've already shared one example with you. And, well, I hope that we'll exchange our business cards, but I would certainly count on cooperating more closely with scientific staff, especially thinking about hydrogen technologies. But also we would like to ask you for this knowledge transfer. I've shaped the needs of engineers, some very specific needs that will make it possible for them to face the challenges. And also, I believe that with this cooperation, education appeared in my activity, where I can be an intermediary in transferring knowledge to engineers. I hope that will just release the spark and we'll set this positive fire to this initiative. Well, certainly I hope for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are sticking to the time limit, but I wanted to ask you whether you have any questions, maybe from internet users or here in the room. If not, let me thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interesting debate. Certainly, the future is blue. Let us hope that we'll have a chance to wake up in 20 to 30 years in Poland that is clean. And on my part, I would like to add that when I look at the Polish hydrogen agreement that I've been involved in developing together with Sławek Wolski, I headed a group on education and awareness raising. I wanted to tell you that this hydrogen agreement has turned us into a big hydrogen family. We'd like to show you that raising awareness and educating permeates all walks of hydrogen-related world. This adventure is only beginning. It will not end with the signing of the agreement. We want to work on developing and designing curricula. We want to meet the future employees halfway through and adjust the school requirements to the needs of the blue future.